Okay, pre-AP biology. Today I want you to watch this video, which is kind of the first part of the immune system. We will continue with this the next time we meet in class, but wanted you to watch the first part of it today because this is kind of the basics of the immune system. I think it's pretty easy to pick up in this 10, 15-minute video. So when we think about immunity, I'm going to guess that the first thing that probably comes to mind is your white blood cells, right? Your white blood cells are, kind of the main defense mechanism that your body has against pathogens. Pathogens are organisms that cause disease. For example, this picture here, what you're seeing, this little green guy here is a little bacteria that may have gotten into the body, by a variety of different ways. And this big blob that you see in the background, this is a white blood cell. And it's about to kind of engulf this bacteria and get rid of it. That's one of the functions of your white blood cells is that they'll do that. The thing about the immune system and your white blood cells is there's a lot of different types of white blood cells, and they kind of do different things. And we'll get into those as we go through the next couple of lectures. But today, again, I just want to start by just kind of getting a basic understanding of what your immune system does and just some of the functions of it. So we'll start here with the definition of a disease. It says any change that disrupts normal body functions is a disease. And diseases can kind of come in three different categories. There's hereditary diseases like genetic diseases. For example, sickle cell anemia, PKU, things that we've talked about before, cystic fibrosis. Those are things that are hereditary. Those aren't things that are contagious. You know, you're not going to catch cystic fibrosis if you're around somebody that has cystic fibrosis. Right? That's a hereditary, a genetic disease that gets passed down from one generation to the next. There's environmental diseases, things that can cause you to get sick just by being exposed to them in the environment. For example, skin cancer. You can get skin cancer from being exposed to ultraviolet radiation from the sun. If you don't wear sunscreen, for example. There's a disease called mesothelioma. Maybe you've heard of that before. They have like commercials for it. Mesothelioma is basically caused by breathing in asbestos, which is an air pollutant. But again, these are environmental things. Just because somebody has mesothelioma or somebody has skin cancer, that doesn't mean that you're going to catch it from them. Okay. And then finally, we have what we call infectious diseases. Infectious diseases are diseases that are caused by pathogens. These are microorganisms. In some cases, they're large organisms that aren't microscopic, like things like worms, for example. Worms can be pathogenic. They can get into your body and cause diseases. But infectious diseases are caused by pathogens. And in most cases, they can be passed from one person to the next, depending on the type of infectious disease it is. So the following organisms are pathogenic. They're things that can cause diseases. Viruses, for example. The big one that's been in the news recently, obviously, has been the coronavirus. The coronavirus can be passed from one person to the next. The chickenpox virus is another example. The HIV virus is another example. There's hundreds of different examples of viruses that people can obtain or catch from somebody else. Bacterial diseases, one that comes to mind is strep throat, right? Strep throat is actually caused by a bacterial or by a bacteria. So you get strep throat, you've got a bacteria living in your throat that causes disease. Protists, protists, there's a whole kingdom of organisms, right? Protists. Some protists cause disease. There's one of the most notorious ones. It's called malaria. Malaria is a disease that you get in the tropics. It's spread by a mosquito, but the organism is actually a little protist that lives inside of the salivary glands of the mosquito, and it can be passed from one person to the next by this vector. It's called a mosquito, an Anopheles mosquito, more specifically. Worms. Again, some worms can cause diseases. Tapeworms come to mind. Hookworms, pinworms, heartworms in dogs. Those are all pathogenic. Then finally, funguses. There are some fungi that can cause disease. Athlete's foot fungus. They call it that for a reason. All right. So these are all different agents of disease. Um, so make sure we know this list. Okay. All right. So the thing about pathogens is you have them around you all the time. I mean, bacteria, for example. I mean, right now, I guarantee you on your hands, there's bacteria. Now, I don't care how many times you wash your hands, you're not going to get all these bacteria off your hands. They're on your face, they're on your desk, they're on the doorknob that you touch. I mean, they're on the stapler that you staple your papers with. I mean, these pathogens are all around us all the time, and they want to get into our bodies. Now, the biggest reason why they want to get inside of us is because the inside of the human body is like the perfect breeding grounds for these microorganisms. Like bacteria, for example, inside of our body, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of water. There's a nice environment. 98.6 degrees is a nice temperature for bacteria to live in. So it's probably no surprise why they want to get into our body so badly, because they want to reproduce. And if they have perfect living conditions, they're going to reproduce. All right, so that's kind of an ideal situation for a lot of these organisms. So our body has, kind of evolved defense mechanisms. We have ways to defend ourselves against all of these, microorganisms, bacteria, and viruses, and protists, and all these things. Now, we're going to talk today about what we call the first lines of defense. The first lines or the front lines of defense. For example, your skin. Your skin is a defense mechanism, believe it or not, against a lot of these pathogens. Mucous membranes, I'll talk about what those are in a second. Then finally, something called the inflammation response. These are all kind of front lines of defense that will kind of help stop any organism from getting into our body. They're what we call non-specific. So it doesn't really matter, for example, like your skin. It really doesn't matter what the organism is. Your skin is going to try to stop it from getting in no matter what. Mucous membranes, the same thing, inflammation response. All of these things work to keep anything out. Now, the problem is they're not always 100% effective, because sometimes things get into the body, they get past these first lines of defense, and then your body has to do something else to get rid of them. And we'll talk about what that is in the next lecture. But let's just kind of take a look at these first lines of defense. All right, the first one is your skin. Your skin shields the entire body. It constantly sheds itself. In fact, the shedding of your skin is actually a really important defense mechanism. Because, I mean, just for example, taking a look at this picture here, this is kind of a little cross section of your skin. This kind of outer layer here, this is called the epidermis, is kind of the outer layer of your skin. A lot of bacteria and microorganisms will live on your skin. We can clean them off the best we can, but we're not going to get them all off. But a lot of those organisms live on the surface. So your skin cells constantly die and they shed. They just get sloughed off and they just fall off into the environment. But by doing that, when they shed, they release with it all of those organisms. So when a skin cell falls off of your body, it's carrying with it, some bacteria most likely. So your skin constantly sheds itself, which is a really good thing. It actually is a way to kind of defend itself against microorganisms. Another thing that your skin does is it secretes different chemicals, oils, sweat, even tears. inside of your eye, all of that stuff actually contains either like acids or some types of chemicals that will just kill bacteria. One of these, for example, these oils, is called sebaceous oil. Um, next time, well, I hate to say this to kids, but because it's kind of gross, but try not showering for a couple of days. I know no one's going to probably do that, but let's say, for example, I don't know, let's say you go camping for a couple of days, and let's say you just don't take a shower for, I don't know, 48 hours or something. Try running your hand through your hair, and you'll feel the oil that's being secreted by your skin. It's actually a way that your body can defend itself, because the oil actually will kill bacteria that live on the skin. So again, our skin has this ability to kind of defend itself against organisms. Mucous membranes. Mucous membranes, basically any opening on the human body, nasal passages, your mouth, like your trachea, leading into your lungs, for example, your ear canals, even, I hate to say this, it's kind of gross, but um, your anus, like your hole. There's actually mucous membranes in there. Even the vaginal cavity, even in the penis of the male, the urethra that carries your urine out, there's mucous membranes in that as well. Anywhere there's an opening, because I mean, let's think about this. This opening will or is an area where organisms can get in. If that is an opening, if it's an area that's exposed to the environment, things from the environment can get in there. I mean, females get urinary tract infections, for example. In your nose. I mean, there's organisms that can get up in there. You can breathe them in through your nose. So these mucous membranes are actually really, really important, because there's a couple different things. Within those mucous membranes, there's little hairs, there's little cilia that will help trap larger particles. Like, for example, in the nose, for example, we have little nose hairs that will trap a lot of these bigger, like, dirt particles and things like that. I mean, that's kind of what a booger is. It's basically just mucus and dirt that's all just kind of collected in your nose. It's kind of gross, but everybody gets them. Also, the mucus contains an enzyme. It's called lysozyme, and lysozyme it's an acidic enzyme that again will kill and break down the cell walls of a lot of bacteria. So, again, all of these openings on your body have those mucous membranes, and again, they're designed to keep organisms out. They're really effective actually at doing that. All right, now, if pathogens do get into the body, if, let's say, for example, I don't know, they just get past the mucous membranes or they get past the skin, then your white blood cells are going to have to do something for you. All right, your white blood cells are kind of like the soldiers of your body. I'll kind of be referring to that as we go through this unit, as your white blood cells kind of acting as soldiers. That's kind of what they do. Now, this is an example of what we call the inflammation response. And a really good example of the inflammation response is, let's say, for example, that you get a paper cut or you get a splinter on your finger or something, whatever, something kind of minor. But, when you get a splinter, like here, for example, in this picture on the left, here's a picture of a pin that is like kind of punctured the skin, right? So there's been kind of a breach. There's been kind of an opening, where organisms can get in. So if you get a paper cut or you poke yourself with a pin or you get a splinter, then that skin has been opened, right? That's one of your first lines of defense. So that's a place where bacteria are going to try to get into the human body, and they're going to get in no matter what. They're going to get in the body. Now, the first thing that happens during the inflammation response is The the broken skin cells send out a signal. They send out a hormone. It's called histamine. Histamine is basically a chemical message that goes to your brain, and it tells your brain as well as all your other cells that, hey, there's been a breach, there's been an opening, and these bacteria have gotten into the body. So now your body has to prepare for the possibility of an infection. So that histamine, that chemical, is the first thing that has to get sent out. It's kind of like an alarm goes off in your body. Think of it that way. Now, eventually, when this alarm goes off, several things start to occur. Okay, if you look at this middle picture here, look at this blood vessel. Notice how it's become much larger compared to what it was in the first picture. This is what we call swelling. So the blood vessel will actually swell. It'll get larger. And what that does is it allows more blood to flow to that area. Now, one of the things that travels within your blood is a specific type of a white blood cell called a phagocyte. Phagocytes are one example of a white blood cell, and what their job is to basically just consume and eat these bacteria. So as soon as that histamine gets sent out, as soon as that alarm gets sent out, then all those or I should say, all those phagocytes travel to that area and they start devouring these bacteria. Now, in the meantime, the skin is probably swelling. It's probably getting larger. When you get a cut or whatever happens, typically you get swelling that happens around the cut, and that's all because of this. This response that's happening. And eventually these phagocytes will devour everything that they're supposed to devour, and then they'll just go back into the bloodstream and go back to doing what they normally do, and then the swelling will eventually go down. But this is what the inflammation response is. The word inflamed, basically refers to the swelling part of it. It might turn red. It might be, kind of a different coloration because of all the blood traveling to that area. If the infection is bad enough, the fever response will kick in. Your body temperature might go up. But that's only if the infection gets too big. Sometimes it will do that, sometimes it won't. So let's kind of review this. Okay, the inflammation response. So it occurs when pathogens get past the skin or the mucus, like as for example, if you get a splinter. So histamine is released by the damaged body cells. And that's a really important thing. The blood vessels will expand around the infected area. That will usually lead to swollen tissue. The fever, the temperature will go up, most likely. Sometimes it'll go up just in the infected area. For example, like like where the infection is, let's say in your finger, that part of your body temperature might be up a little bit higher than the rest of your body. If the infection is too great and it spreads to the rest of your body, then the entire body temperature will go up. But usually, the fever, the temperature will go up, if not in the infected area, possibly in the entire body. Your white blood cells, the phagocytes, will arrive at the infection. Those white blood cells will kill the pathogens. But then eventually, that area will clot itself. The platelets will clot the blood, and it'll seal off the infected area. Okay, so this is an important um, process to understand because this will take place no matter what type of infection you have. If it gets past that skin, gets past that first lines of defense, this inflammation response will kick in and it will try to stop the infection or the spread of the infection. Now, if that doesn't work, because sometimes this doesn't work 100%, then your body has to do something else. And that's what we'll talk about in our next lecture. All right, guys, that's it for today. Have a good day. I will see you soon.